Hello, everybody. My name is Steve, and I'm here today with Holly Tinsley. Holly, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, I know it's always difficult to get these scheduled when we have the time difference and everything. So thankfully we're able to work it out.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Like, literally, time differences still confuse me. It's been a year now. You'd think I'd be used to it by now, but I have no idea when things are or where things are. So we've managed though. It's all good.
Yeah, and it's the daylight savings thing has tripped me up a few times in the past couple of weeks. So that's why I was messaging Holly a few days ago. Like, this is the time here. Is this your time where you are? Just to be sure, because it kept tripping me up. So thankfully I was on time this time.
Yeah, that was amazing. That was like super organized and efficient.
Yeah, because yeah, it had tripped me up a couple of times, and I talked to Vitle May Mist. She's an author in Iceland, and they don't observe daylight savings time. So I assumed they did, and they didn't, and it ended up being kind of a mess. But so thankfully it worked out okay. So I wanted to congratulate you on the book of We Men in a Bastion Shadow. It's done really well. I've heard just a ton of great things about it. So how has the reception been for you?
I mean, I'm still slightly, a little bit shocked. I think for anyone who's like bringing out a new book, and especially a first book, and especially a self-published book as well, it's there's always so many like obstacles and challenges and things. So many writers don't get any reception at all. So, I mean, I've been really lucky. I've been so fortunate in having some really fantastic readers and people who are very vocally like happy to talk about the book and what they like about it. So, yeah, I am like incredibly fortunate to have found so many amazing people that have kind of tuned into what I wrote. So, yeah, it's just been a really strange and really fantastic year for me. It's just over a year now since I published, and I'm still kind of getting over the shock of it. Really, I thought maybe
So yeah,
five or six people might read it. Like my mum and dad, they might pick up a copy. But yeah, it's just been really fantastic.
yeah, it's got to be such a strange feeling to work on something for so long and to put so much time and effort into it, and then it just kind of goes out there, and you can't control what happens after that. It must be a really weird feeling. What was that like for you?
I mean, terrifying is probably the first word. The fear is real. But I mean, it was so exciting for me because I had worked, like you say, for a long time on this book, and I'd kind of dabbled in doing a bit of blog writing and a bit of magazine writing and things like that. But for years I hadn't thought that I actually had it in me to do a full novel. So when I sat and wrote it, I thought, oh, this is great, and I've kind of got to this point where I've done something I didn't think that I could do, like just for myself. To then kind of think, well, actually, I might have a go at putting it out there and just, seeing what other people think. And like I said, I thought maybe two or three people might pick it up and go, oh, this is okay, but to actually put it out there and take that gamble on it and to have the reaction that I did was, really fulfilling and like really satisfying. So it's been so good.
Mhm. Definitely. Yeah, it's done really well. I've heard just a ton of great things about it, and all the people that I trust, all the people that I look for reviews, and whenever they like a book, I'll usually like it, and they all rave about it. So I had to go read it. So I did finish it this last week. So for someone who's not familiar with it, how would you describe it?
I would describe it well, I say I would describe it. This is how other people describe it, and I've just started stealing their descriptions. It's a gas lamp grimdark fantasy. It is set in a corrupt kind of urban cityscape where the main character is a former soldier who has been to prison. He's now come out. He's now working as a kind of assassin mercenary for the leader of the city, and it's really a story about his journey, how he gets embroiled in all this corruption, secrets and lies. There's a lot of crime, there's a lot of kind of gang warfare going on in the city, and it's pretty much kind of Assassin's Creed meets Gangs of New York with a little bit of Peaky Blinders in there as well.
It's pretty good description of it. And
Totally
I have
stole it off other people.
yeah.
Other
Well,
people describe my book better than I do.
yeah. Isn't that funny how that happens like that? Like, they describe it so good that it just like, yeah, that is what it is. It
Like,
works
yeah,
out.
that's it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's like an author-wide thing though, like not being able to describe your own book. So
Yeah, I guess it's probably a thing of you get so close with it that it just becomes part of you, and it's hard to describe it to someone else when you have such an attachment to it.
yeah, definitely. And I think like other people will always see things in your work that you don't particularly see. So for me, I set out kind of with, a certain book in mind, and then people kind of came back to me and said, "Oh, this is, especially the Peaky Blinders thing. That's a new one to me because I never thought about that comparison." And then, someone said it, and someone else said it, and I was like, "Oh, actually, okay, yeah, like a little bit, yeah, I can see it."
Yeah. And what were some inspirations for the story when you sat down to start writing it? What did you have in mind, or what kind of inspired you?
I kind of had a mishmash of different inspirations, and I think a lot of it was there were different inspirations for different aspects of the book. So the aesthetics, a lot of the books and movies and things that inspire me are kind of all 19th century, kind of penny dreadful, very dark, kind of sinister stories. So like your Jack the Rippers and I can't remember the name of it now. From Hell as well. That was it, which was an Alan Moore graphic novel.
Mhm.
So that played a big part in creating how the city looked and how it felt. Um, I mean, people are right. Assassin's Creed again was a huge inspiration for me. It's like my favorite video game franchise ever. So a lot of the characters, the way they kind of interact with the city and how they interact with each other, did come from that franchise. And also there was a kind of a little bit of like Musketeers as well. That's probably one of my favorite like classic stories. So people probably noticed there's quite a bit of kind of French inspiration in there, so with like the city names and kind of some of the character names as well. So it really did just become a melting pot of all sorts of different things. And yeah, even to the point where I was getting inspiration from places that where I grew up were very industrial. So where I live in the UK in the Midlands, it's all kind of industrial revolution era. So we have a lot of old factories, old foundries, mines, things like that. So even like local places came into play when I was kind of
Hmm.
creating this world.
Yes, and speaking of character names, I want to thank you because in fantasy, one of my pet peeves is when these character names are like 20 letters long and have 15 syllables, and they're hard. They're hard to discern which character is which. So thank you for keeping the name simple and to the point and short. Was that deliberate?
It was. I mean, I don't want to say anything that's going to upset any like fantasy writers or readers, but yeah, I think there is a theme in fantasy, and there's like a style for names where you've got a lot of vowels, and you can't always tell what they're meant to be. So yeah, I was just like, do you know what? Like, you never see any like Collins in fantasy. Let's have a couple of Collins and a couple of Allens and things like that. So just keep it simple, keep it straightforward.
Yeah, it really helps because it's especially in fantasy because you're building a world from the ground up. So as a reader, when we're reading fantasy, and I'm sure you can relate to this, is when you're reading fantasy, you have to learn the world, but then it's hard to learn which character is which when all the names are so confusing, at least for me. So
Yeah,
it's
I think for me as well as like an element of it is a fantasy book, but it's a very kind of low realistic fantasy. It's very real world kind of inspired. So I wanted to keep it as realistic as possible. So these are names that you would hear like in a normal day-to-day situation. They're not going to take you kind of out of the reality of it.
mm.
But I think if I wrote like a high fantasy, for example, then I would probably write more fancy names rather than just having like Bobs and Sams and things.
I don't know. There's Samwise Gamgee, so there's always that Sam. I guess
That's
there's a
true.
precedent. Yeah, it's
That's
not too
true.
bad. And the characters, I was wondering about Taryn. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Because Taryn, I wondered if you had studied or if you had some kind of knowledge of serial killers or of psychopaths, because his personality and the way that he is afraid of, and I'll avoid spoilers as much as I can, but it's he avoids contact, personal contact. He's really the way that he views the world. I wondered um, if you had either prior knowledge or looked into how that kind of person would behave.
I don't have a huge amount of prior knowledge. I mean, I think I'm probably the only person in the world that doesn't sit and listen to like true crime podcasts. But I am really interested in kind of psychology and psychosis and the way that people's minds work, especially when they work in a way that is out of the ordinary. So I've done a lot of reading. I've had like lots of kind of interesting biographies and autobiographies and things like that I've sat and read of people. And I used to do a blog as well a little while ago called Dark Psychology, which was not so much about like serial killers and psychopaths, but just about the weird and wonderful ways that like the human brain works. So, you know, different phenomena that occur and how people react in certain situations. And I think it's fascinating. There's such a variety and wide spectrum of ways in which, you know, our brains work as machines. So when I wrote Taran, I really wanted to be careful about being true to the science of it and how people would react, especially because when I created Taran, I didn't want it to be clear whether or not he was a psychopath or whether this was just somebody who had these experiences that had shaped them into the person they are. So there's a bit of a nature versus nurture debate going on with Taran. So, you know, some people fall on one side of it, some people fall on the other. But that's kind of where I wanted him to go. And yeah, hopefully I got it right. But yeah, people will just have to let me know.
He was a very compelling character, and the more that you get to know him, the more compelling he becomes. So I want to say more, but I should try to avoid spoilers for people who haven't read it, because you should go read it. And with the Vanguard, he was another character that I really enjoyed, and I enjoy those books that have those characters who walk the gray area, who aren't perfect. All of them are flawed in some way. Was that something else that you tried to do, to have all the characters have that middle ground, and none of them are, you know, the hero that's going to come in and save the day?
I mean, my main aim with these characters was just to make them as real as possible and to make them as kind of multi-layered and as multi-dimensional as I possibly could. So especially with Vanguard, I drew on a lot of my own knowledge of things like trauma experience and PTSD and kind of the way that people become quite insular and reflective and all the different characteristics they exhibit. I would say, you know, for most of the characters, there is an element of some kind of study of, you know, like characteristics of certain people or different kind of character groups. So I didn't stick 100% to that, but I did kind of use it as a jumping off point, and then kind of brought in like little bits of humor and like quirks. And, you know, I love it when I read books and characters have like these quirks that they wouldn't particularly notice themselves, or that, you know, other people would pick up on, but they're just kind of there in the background all the time. So, you know, like prime example, like not, this is kind of a spoiler, but it's not really. Like Mandego in the book, he's always got like fruit or some kind of food with him, which is just like a little quirk I wanted to put in there, just, you know, to make him a little bit more, you know, human, a little bit more relatable to people.
Oh, that's interesting. And you mentioned the humor in it, and I thought there was some really hilarious parts in the book that just, even during these really dramatic, you know, these action scenes and all these things are going on, there's these fun clips of dialogue in there, and the dialogue I thought was really, and one thing that really stuck out to me from the book is that the dialogue is, there's no wasted dialogue, that all the dialogue is meaningful. So whenever somebody says something, you pay attention because you know it's going to mean something. So was that something that you tried to do as well, as to have the dialogue really really tight? Because it seems like it's really thoughtful that with your dialogue.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really glad that it came across that way and it worked out really well for me. When I when I was writing the dialogue, but also kind of the whole thing, is I was so much more focused on the characters and what they were doing internally. So for me, like, especially you've got like Vanguard, who's very closed off and like he's, you know, not a big talker, let's be honest. So, you know, for me, it was all about he would say more by not saying things. So, you know, how was his body moving? How was he interacting? What was he kind of looking at the time? All these little details. And then that really kind of pared down the dialogue to, you know, something quite minimal. And the same with a lot of the other characters. There's a lot of mistrust between them as well. So they are really sparing with what they say to each other. They're really careful. Everything is calculated. So I think it says a lot about the world that they live in and how they have to survive in it. They keep everything close to their chests. They have to.
Yeah, for survival. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Definitely. And you mentioned getting, being your first book. What was that experience of getting your book published or self-publishing? Was that something that you planned to do as just a self-publish, or did you try to send it to publishers, or what was that process like?
I tried to send it off to maybe about 3 publishers or maybe 4, and I think I got like 2 no responses, and then I got 2 responses which were like, yeah, we like it, but it's not really what we're looking for at the moment. We wish you luck in the future, blah blah, and all that. So that was quite nice to get. And then after that, I kind of just thought, you know what? I don't know if like trad publishing is the way that I want to go. I do like to challenge myself. I like to set myself personal goals. I'm a person that's not happy if I don't have a project or 12 to work on at a time. So for me, it became like a personal challenge almost, just to see how far I could pick this thing up and run with it. So I started looking into hybrid publishing and going through indie publishing houses and then self-pub. And I think after a couple of months, it became evident that I really wanted to, have full control and do my own cover, do my own promo and publicity. So, I decided to go self-publishing, and I started kind of doing a little bit of research on social media and building up a little bit of a network of people who are incredibly helpful and generous with their advice. And just snowballed from there, really. So it was a fantastic learning process. And, I think for anyone that does it, you get so much out of just the process of meeting people and talking to people and understanding, the process and the journey that you go through.
Yeah, I think pretty much everything I read now is self-pub, and I think I think before there was this perception of self-published books, like they're not good enough to be published by a publisher, but I think that's going away. I think people are starting to realize that there's so many great books that are self-published now.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think the thing that people are starting to realize now is that with traditional publishing, they put out amazing books, but in terms of like the options and things that you can find, there is a really narrow market, because obviously they're doing it because they know what's going to be successful and they want to stick to like those certain patterns and certain styles. But then you've got self-pub and you can literally have like anything, and you take a gamble. You write a book and it's either going to be something people like or something people don't like, but you can do anything. Like, the freedom you have is just incredible. If you want to write a book about marshmallow aliens in the 14th century, just go for it. It's no limit.
Why not, right?
That's my next book, that is.
Yeah. What are you working on now? What's next for you?
So at the moment, I am working on the second book in the Vanguard series. So that is so nearly finished. It's literally causing me pain at the moment because I really want to get it out there and done. But it's with my editor at the moment. She's doing a final run through, and then I'm going to take it back. It's out with a couple of betas at the moment who are reading it for me, just to kind of give it a final set of eyes, and then aiming for a spring release. So, although I'm not saying when in spring, because I've made that mistake before and had to backpedal. And then after that, I have started a novella, which is a standalone novella, which I'm hoping to get out maybe 6 months after that, which will be, it's not a gas lamp, I wouldn't say, but it's not too far off. It's kind of maybe a little bit earlier, maybe what people would call flintlock, I guess, maybe. So, and that's kind of in its later stages now of being edited, and then that will go to my editor for a quick look. So
that's exciting. Yeah, looking forward to that. And
yeah,
do you know how many books are going to be in the Vanguard series? Do you have it planned out?
So there are 4 books planned in the series. So the second book, as I've just said, will probably be kind of, I'd say, mid-spring. So I'm really trying to be careful not to say a day here.
Yeah.
After that, the third book should be out the following year after that, and then after that there should be a fourth one, which will be the final one in the series, probably about 12 to 18 months after that. So I'm trying to get them out one a year, but again, it's a case of I'd rather do them right than rush them out. So, but there will be 4 eventually.
Nice. Yeah, it must be tough to try and balance those expectations and have it out, but still take your time and make it the way you want to make it. It must be, is that a tough balance to find?
Oh, absolutely. It's probably been the one thing that has played on my mind the most, especially when you bring out the second one, because there is, a great debate about whether you should read the first one before any more are released. And then there's also people that have read the first one, then want the second one. So, you have this element of pressure, this new layer of expectation that you don't have with the first. So, and I would be lying if I said it didn't keep me up at night sometimes, thinking oh my God, I need to get this book out. But, there's patience pays off, hopefully in the end. And it is going to be coming out really soon. It's near future we're talking. So, and I really hope that it's going to be worth the wait and that people will enjoy the second one as much as the first.
With the reception of the first book and the positive feedback you've had, has that changed your creative process for the second one? Have you been writing and stop and rethink things and second guess yourself because of that, or have you just gone with what you wanted to do from the beginning?
I don't think second guessing myself is what I would call it. I think certainly there's more awareness of what people critiqued, what went well, what didn't go so well, and there is a lot of wanting to stay true to your own voice, but I think it's just a natural progression for any writer or any person that is creating something, that you kind of evolve and grow from your criticism. So, there were things from the first book that I kind of looked at in the second one. I was like, oh, do you know what? Actually, I do use that word too much. So I think just your awareness of what you're doing is heightened. And also, I think for me, I had a very definite plan of where I wanted to go from the first book to the second book. And then I released the first book, and people would message me, or they'd be chatting to me online, and they'd say, oh, I love it when this happens to this character, and are we going to see more of this character? And I was like, well, actually, probably not. But then I kind of started thinking, I was like, okay, actually, do you know what? I can see this character evolving now, and or different elements of the plot kind of changing, not because I'm trying to please people, but because actually I think the more you see what people see in your book, the more it helps you to understand your own world. I think that other perspective, as writers, is really useful.
That's a good point. Yeah. Is that when the book started to get more attention, what was that feeling like when it started to gain traction and started to get positive reviews and started to get recognized a little bit more? What was it? What was that feeling like?
I mean, I was quite surprised, because I kind of geared myself up for this to be a really long process of trying to get my name out there and engage and interact with people. And I was so incredibly fortunate that within a month or two, probably 8 weeks of my book coming out, I'd had some quite exciting people and kind of big in the self-pub industry, podcasters and reviewers and things like that saying, oh, okay, well, we'll pick your book up and we'll give it a read. So, I mean, I did the TBR con. I think it was my book released in the October, and then in the January I was on a convention panel with Peter McLean and Ben Galley, and I was just like, what am I doing here? What? Who invited me to this? But it was so surreal, and it was really exciting for me. I felt like I kind of got a springboard, jump off. So yeah, I'm eternally grateful to all the people that picked up my book early and continue to do so now. It's just been incredible.
Gosh, that must be crazy to release a book in October, and in January you're sitting next to those authors. That must have been a great feeling.
It was a fantastic feeling. I've made it into a bit of a joke now that I'm the Hawkeye in the Avengers. So I'm sat next to Thor and Captain America and the Incredible Hulk, and like there's me with my little bow and arrow, you know, just in the corner. So, but yeah, it was so funny, and it was such a good experience.
That's awesome, man. That's great. That must have been a really fun experience to be go from in a few short months. That's a really great accomplishment.
It was, and it was terrifying as well, because I just kept thinking, oh my god, someone's gonna ask me a really difficult question, and I'm not gonna know what to say. So yeah, it was good fun.
And when did you start writing?
I've written on and off for probably most of my life. I wrote a lot in school, so I did a lot of like short story and poems. I did a lot of those competitions that schools do, where the kids all send their creative writing off, and then everybody wins, no matter how good or bad the writing is. And I think up until possibly like when I started like my first years of secondary school, I was writing quite regularly. And then I stopped. I kind of took a break, and I decided that I was going to be like a rock star, or like, you know, Oscar winning actress, as you do when you're 13. And I didn't come back to it until probably like early adulthood, like maybe into like my 20s. And I started writing sketches, comedy sketches, and blogs and things like that, which, you know, apparently about 5 people thought were funny and no one else did. So I decided that comedy probably wasn't my route to take, and I started doing then the more serious blogs. So I started writing about like games, movies, like I did the psychology pieces as well, and I started writing fiction properly probably about 4 years ago now. I'd say so. It's been quite a rapid progression for me. But yeah, I think I'm one of those people that I let life get in the way a little bit for a while, and then suddenly it's just like, okay, now's the time, I've got to do this. And I sat down and hammered out my first book, I think in 6 weeks, you know.
Oh,
like
wow.
Sat writing for like 12, 14, 16 hours a day, just, you know, full on down the rabbit hole. And then yeah, I haven't stopped since then, really.
Wow, that's awesome. And you mentioned wanting to be a rock star for a while when you were younger. Do you play any instruments, or were you a singer, or what did you, when you were that age, what did you want to do in a band?
I tried various instruments. Like, I really wanted to be able to play something, but I was so terrible at them that I very quickly realised that was not a good idea. So I did used to sing in a few bands, and I do like to rock out on the karaoke every now and again. But again, you know, I don't think that, you know, the charts are not calling me. Let's put it that way.
A little bit of karaoke never hurt anyone, right?
Yeah,
Still fun.
exactly. It's all
Yeah.
about the showmanship. It's all about the flair.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can make a career out of that if you're careful.
Yeah, that's it. It's
For
worked
sure.
for many.
Yeah. No, it's no, I don't know. Your book is really really good. And what is your creative process when you sat down to write this book, or just writing in general? What is your creative process?
I tend to find my process does change depending on like what day of the week it is, or kind of at what point in the book I am. So, I mean, I do work part time. I have another job as well, which is really odd hours. So I can find myself like working at like 12, 1, like early hours of the morning, or I can find myself like being up really early. So for me, a lot of the time I'm up and working and writing by about 5:30, 6 a.m. So for me, like the early morning is the best time to sit and be creative. Plus it's really quiet, and like there's not much going on, so it's easy not to get distracted. I mean, I don't particularly plot anything. I have ideas, and I'll have like little notes and things like that, and maybe things that I want to achieve during that writing session. And then I just tend to ignore them and just write whatever pops into my mind. I would say my process is definitely more focused on writing first, and then like changing things around, and fixing things and editing. So, you know, for me, like a first draft of a book can come really quickly. So, you know, I think anything from like maybe like a couple of months, right down to maybe 6 or 7 weeks to write a full first draft, and then it's the editing process that takes its time. And I do love a good spreadsheet as well. That's the other thing I love. I have so many spreadsheets. I have my death sheet, I have my character sheets, I have my timeline sheets. So yeah, I love a good color coded Excel spreadsheet.
That was actually my next question is how, because when you're writing fantasy, you're creating a whole world. So how do you keep track of, so you use spreadsheets to keep track of your characters in your world, or do you use that for everything?
I mostly use the spreadsheets for things like kind of timelines and like life spans, so like deaths, births, like big events, things like that, just so I don't get them confused. I have like character profiles, like sort of like a book bible, I guess it would be, but rather than being one document, I have literally separate documents for every single character. So that can get a little bit confusing sometimes when you're trying to find someone. But yeah, I think I mainly just, I call it like a post-it note style of writing. So it's literally like one bit of info is here, one is here, one is here, one is here. So it does get a little bit chaotic, but I like to keep everything really separate. It's like just the way my brain likes to work. So yeah, you don't want to see like my folders on my laptop. It's ridiculous.
At least on your laptop and not on a, because whenever I read fantasy, I picture the author with a big wall full of string and pictures and, these big, because it's a ton of to keep track of. And as a reader, sometimes it's hard to keep track of who's who. And can imagine as an author to create that from the ground up must be a lot of keeping track of everything.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I physically couldn't do that because my house is so small. If I started doing that, there would be no room for, my family or furniture or anything. But I think for me as well is I am such a hoarder of information. So I keep things that I will probably never use and won't need, but they're just ideas that I've had, and I've just thought, you know what, if I don't save that somewhere, one day it's going to turn around and like I'm going to think, oh God, I need it now. So yeah, like I have like a document that has like scars on like people's like faces and bodies and things like that, just so I can remember where they are in my head. Like I don't know if they'll ever be mentioned in the book, but at least I know where they are. So yeah, it's quite like detailed, I suppose.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's that's pretty intricate. But I guess you have to be to keep track of everything.
Yeah, exactly. And you never know when like these things might like come up again or might be needed or relevant. So yeah, just keep everything. Don't throw it away.
Or even an idea that you had or something that you never mentioned may become a whole nother book or a whole nother series that just you had tucked away somewhere and just getting a chance to use.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah. And you mentioned you used to write about movies and video games, and I wondered, as you were writing We Men of Vast and Shadow, did you picture certain actors in your head when you were writing for your characters?
I did for some actors, like, and some characters. Like, some of them I still can't picture, like, who I can picture how they look in my head, but not an actor or actress that would fit that role. So, like Henriette, for example, like, I've never seen anybody who matches what I kind of imagine Henriette to kind of look like and her personality, like her vibe. Ones that I did know were oh god, I've got to try and remember now. So I really like the actor Richard Dormer, who played Doric. I can't even pronounce it now. Beric Dondarrion in Game of Thrones. I love him for Vanguard. Like, he has such an amazing presence, and he's so quietly charismatic, and he can be very, very kind of serious and like grim and like dark, but at the same time there's like this little like playfulness like to him. So yeah, I kind of pictured him in that role. And I don't know, quite a few people have said now like different people that they've pictured, so it's hard for me now to backtrack and like
Yeah.
think of the people I would want in it.
Yeah.
I've got a document about this as well, saved
Oh,
somewhere, where I've got every time someone suggests an actor or an actress to me, I just like put it in the file and save it. So Yeah, there's been some interesting ones. So some I've agreed with, and some I definitely haven't.
Yeah, it's funny the way everyone interprets characters and things like that differently, and everyone has different ideas in their head, so it's hard to keep track.
Yeah, yeah, and I love it when like people tell me stuff like that. So it's really good. It's great.
Yeah. And if you can, what do you know now that you wish you would have known before you started your book?
Oh my gosh, so many things. I mean, I think I know more about myself and the little quirks that I have as a writer. So, little things that come up kind of repetitively in the book, certain words and phrases. So, and they're probably the same ones that a lot of writers get, but I'm definitely more aware of, people nodding now all the time, and like facial expressions that you just see kind of constantly in writing. So it's good because then it challenges you to vary things up. I think I've probably learned a lot about the fact that you can't possibly please everybody. Not everyone is going to like what you do, and that's absolutely fine because there is an audience for whatever you put out there for everything. So it's just finding that right audience and knowing that if you do get critiques, if you do get criticism, thankfully, like 99 times out of 100, it's not personal.
Mm.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm sure that some people do get some pretty personal critiques, but most of the time it's just people having opinions and having a perspective and wanting to voice that, and that's fantastic because it gives us the opportunity to find out what we want as writers, what we want as readers, and yeah, it's all good. I can't think of a better way to put it.
Was that a difficult thing to adjust to when the book was out? Was when you had or when you heard something negative about the book, was that did you have to adjust to dealing with that, or did it take a little bit to get to that point where it's like everyone has their opinions, it's okay, and or did you take it personal at first?
I mean, I have kind of worked in a lot of like industries where there's been a lot of like personal critique and personal criticism. So, you know, I think there was a part of me that was quite used to it already. But again, like nobody likes hearing, that someone doesn't like something you've made. It's always going to sting a little bit, but it's how you react to it and how you move past it. So you can either let it sting and you can get, angry or upset about it, which doesn't do anyone any good, or you can go through it, you can analyze it, you can pick things out and go, yeah, okay, do you know what, I don't agree with that, but that's, it's a fair comment, and actually, maybe they've got a point there, and you can get a lot of positive things out of a negative critique if you take the step back and kind of look at it for what it is and be objective. So, I think it would be a lie to say it doesn't kind of, still take you back a little bit and, have a little bit of a sting in the tail. But, it's part of the job, it's part of what we're doing here. So if people didn't give critiques, then we would never improve, we'd never get any better.
That's a great point. Yeah, that's a great point. It's true that you can use that as spin it into a positive thing and not let it become a negative thing for you.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
And I was, I've talked to a few different authors who write dark fantasy or grimdark books, and they all have a different opinion on the term grimdark. So, what does that term mean to you?
I knew this question was going to come up. It always comes up. Um, I mean, do you know what? Grimdark's a funny one because I've had so many people say to me, like, you do, like, your book's not a grimdark book. It's not that grim and dark. And then I've had other people who have, like, messaged me and said, why have you written this book? Like, it's so dark and, like, grim and horrible and I can't read it. So, it's one of those things where it's so personal and it's so down to the individual, like, reader. But to define what grimdark is to them and what dark fantasy is to them, for me, I would say grimdark it's a more gritty, it's a more realistic style of dark fantasy. So it's very focused on the human elements. There's lots of grimdark books out there that are magical, but for me, the ones that really resonate are the ones that are very real world, very low fantasy. It's all about the scenarios that people find themselves in where there's like trauma and there's difficulty and how they either overcome it or they don't, and all the relationships that they build around these scenarios.
Mhm. Yeah, it's so funny that the term has such a reaction the reaction that it does. It's strange to me. I don't know. It's interesting.
It really does. I've started referring to my books now as Gateway Grimdark, because I think they just sit on that like that cusp of what is acceptable as grimdark. So yeah, and maybe the next one I need to like up the body count and make it a bit darker, just to make sure I'm really into the grimdark genre then.
Yeah. And one thing that really struck me at, well, obviously the cover strikes you first, but I really love the cover of the book. Can you tell us about what went into it, or how you chose it, or what that process was like?
The cover was such an amazing and fun part of the process for me. I was so like lucky that I found a lot of the people that helped me and worked with me on the book very locally to me. So my editor is local, my cover artist is local. So I met my cover artist, who's a guy called Luke Michael Copsey, a couple of times over the years because we ran in similar circles around like the local area. And it wasn't until I met him at a convention. It was a comic book movie convention that was taking place on a local farm. So very strange like scenario to have, you know, like stormtroopers walking on one side of you and cows on the other. But he was there, and he'd got a stand there. He was like exhibiting some of he does graphic novels and like amazing artwork. So I kind of naturally just went up and we started chatting and kind of talking about various people we knew and like, you know, bars and things like that we used to go to. And I told him about the book, and I said, you know, I'm looking for an artist. Would you ever consider doing a book cover? Because up until then he hadn't ever really done a book cover other than for his own work. So we kind of said, yeah, we'll make a plan. We'll like not like some mocks and some plans and see where it goes. So I went home and I sent him like a couple of chapters from the book just to give him like the feel of what I was going for, and then, you know, a really brief description of what I wanted, and like maybe a couple of like pictures to give some guidance. And he put together this mock-up, which was, you know, pretty much exactly what you see on the cover. So he just knocked it out of the park on the first try. And I think aside from the colour, the picture itself has stayed exactly as it was from the very first mock-up. So, and he's doing my second book for me as well. So he sent me the mock-up for that about 2 or 3 days ago. I got the plans for it, and I messaged him back, and I was just like, "You're a wizard. There's no other explanation for it. You are magic," because he's done it again. You know, just first try, like exactly what I wanted. So, yeah, absolutely utterly talented, fantastic guy.
Yeah, it's such a great cover, and it fits the book just perfectly. Gets the feel and the vibe of the book in a
Oh,
really
thank you.
special way. Yeah, really great cover. Glad to hear the same artist is doing the second book. It's gonna be great.
I'm going to get him to do all my books now, whether he likes it or not.
Yeah.
That's it. Locked in for life now.
You need to get him a contract, a lifelong contract. Right? Yeah.
I
know. For you, what makes a character compelling?
I think for me, for a character to be compelling, like they don't necessarily have to be good or bad or fit into any particular like archetype or like any kind of box. I feel like I just need to see something within them that makes them vulnerable. That's like a huge thing for me, because I think that's what makes people real. You know, you can have like these great super villains who are destroying cities and they're, you know, bringing down tower blocks and things like that, and it's fun to read and it's great, but it's not relatable until you see some sort of like rawness to them, some sort of edge, some vulnerability. So for me, like the best moments for character building, like both as a writer and a reader, are the moments where it's really simple, innocuous things happening. So I mean, for example, I have this complete obsession with people having their hair cut or their hair brushed, which like so far I haven't actually put it in any books, but I put it in a lot of my short fiction. Is I just find that human contact and connection of like somebody you know, being kind of quiet and just taking care of another human being really compelling. So yeah, stuff like that like really resonates with me.
That's that's a good one. I like that. I never thought of it that way until you mentioned it, but it makes sense. And
It's
it
just
is
me.
really fun.
I'm the only one that says these things.
But it's those little things, like you said, those little innocuous things that really can flesh out a character and give you a different perspective on them.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And I noticed that your book is dedicated to your dad, and I was wondering how he inspired you to write.
I mean, my dad's my number one fan. Like, I mean, to be fair, like, my whole family is like my mom, my sister, like, they're all so incredibly supportive. But when I wrote the first book, I knew I wanted to dedicate it to my dad purely because I think there's so many of the lessons that he instilled in me that I put into writing this book. And, I think there's different things that we do in life where we take different lessons from, people who are around us and who influence us and inspire us. And for me, my work ethic, like my kind of drive very definitely comes from like my dad. So, like my creative side comes from my mum. She's a really like creative, like incredibly like imaginative, like very kind of emotive person. But like to actually sit and like take this whole project of starting like from a first draft all the way through to self-publishing it was, the things that he'd kind of instilled in me from a young age of like, like just like get your head down and like keep working and keep trying and don't give up, don't stop. So yeah, to me it just felt right that this first book would be like dedicated to my dad. And he's gonna watch this and be really embarrassing and like ring me up and be like, "You said all this nice stuff about me."
What was his reaction when you told him or when he saw the book and saw that it was dedicated to him?
I mean, he was really excited. I mean, he has literally bought out. Every time like there's been like a new copy of the book come out. I mean, he had like an early copy to read through. He's bought the paperback. He's bought the audiobook. He's bought the ebook. Like, he's just been so thrilled and so excited, like, and supportive. Like, they both have. They've been amazing. Like, best parents ever.
That's great. That's really great to hear, and that I think having that kind of support, especially from people close to you like that, is really helpful and gives you that extra push to get things done and to keep, like you said, just keep working.
Yeah, yeah. This is going to really confuse them because they're going to be like, "You never say nice things to us in real life. Like, why are you saying nice things now?"
Yeah, that's just the way it goes, right? I mean, to keep them guessing.
That's it, exactly. It keeps them on
Yeah,
their toes.
yeah, exactly. They can't let them get too comfortable. And I was wondering because I think you're writing the book and the atmosphere of the book comes across in a really clear way. So I was wondering how you do that through words because that really fascinates me. How someone can convey atmosphere and tension and just that overall feeling in the air, like the tense and the how do you build that through text? Do you have a way that you do it, or is it just something that you just kind of comes out?
I mean, I kind of have a process for it, but I don't think that I do it with that particularly in mind. I think partly it does just come out that is just my style naturally, but I treat every book like it should be spoken, like it should be something that somebody tells you sitting around a campfire or like, on a dark, dusty night in like an old house and sat in a wingback chair reading from a big book. And I just think that if it sounds good when you say it, then it should mirror that when you read it. So, I mean, when I will write like a chapter and then I will put it through like a program that reads it back to me. So, and I'll listen to it and then kind of pick out like word choices that don't work or things that don't particularly, maybe don't flow as well. But yeah, I think a lot of it is just naturally the way that like I write. I write as I would like to read things. So yeah, tricky question, that one.
Yeah, I was trying to get you. But no, that's one thing that really one of my big takeaways from the book was just because there's certain books you read and you feel like you follow along, but there's certain books that you read that you feel like you're there and you're experiencing the world and you're sitting in these places and you're feeling the tension in the air and that really came across clear in this one. So I was curious if you have a method to that or if it's something that you just comes out.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I think I do kind of visualize a lot as well. I think that does help. Is that I write. I mean, it's kind of a running joke. Is that like I write as if my book is a cutscene from a video game, because I just think like cutscenes are such a great way of like telling such a small amount of information in such a short time. So you've got to really pare it down, and you've got to get the important bits across and still create an atmosphere. So I try and think, would this scene work as a cutscene? So that's how you do it.
Yes, yeah, that's a good way to look at it. And are there any fantasy books that have stuck with you, or books that you go back and read that you find inspiration from, or
There's
books in general?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few. I have probably only really started reading fantasy again, like in the last maybe like year or two. Before that, I was reading a lot of like biographies, like I said, and non-fiction. The ones that I probably come back to the most are I mean, I don't read them now, but I do still have them. There's a children's novelist called Robin Jarvis, who is probably the main like inspiration for me, having like actually started writing in the first place. Like even as a child, his books were so like impactful to me. He wrote fantastic dark fantasy. So he did a trilogy called The Deptford Mice, and then he also did some other books as well. So there were two in particular. There was The Woven Path and there was The Alchemist's Cat, and they were my favourite books when I was younger. I still have a copy of The Alchemist's Cat now, which is like yellow and sun faded and falling apart. But that was like my first introduction to really kind of dark, like not happy endings style fantasy. And just like as a kid, I just loved that. I loved the fact that it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows and unicorns and things. And then like Terry Pratchett as well. Like he's the one author that I will go back to like continuously for the rest of my life and just read and read and read, and I can never like get sick or bored of his stuff, because it's just like magic. It's so fantastic.
Hmm. And have you considered writing other genres, or do you plan to stick with fantasy for now?
I've kind of considered it. I would like to do something that is more of a kind of a black comedy, like dark humor. I do have like quite weird sense of humor, I think. So I would love to do something like that. I love things that are like absurd and surreal and a little bit off kilter. So I don't know if I would maybe do a full novel of that, but I would certainly maybe look at doing like a novella or something shorter. But I think for now, like fantasy is probably where I feel like my most comfortable, and especially kind of the more industrial, like grim fantasy.
Yeah. Grimdark fantasy.
Yes,
I'm
yes,
just teasing. I'm
Grimdark.
teasing. Sorry, I couldn't help it.
Gateway Grimdark.
Gateway Grimdark. That's a good way to describe it. And you mentioned when you were getting ready to publish your book, you looked into getting on social media and promoting your book and getting the network going. What is that like to promote your book on social media? Do you feel like you have to have a presence all the time, or how do you use social media in a way that you can promote your work, but also not to get too wrapped up into it?
I think I mean, it's such a common mistake that, I see people making, is that they come in and they think they have to be on social media 100% of the time, and that, they've got to like follow everything, they've got to do everything. And that's just, you're not going to get anywhere other than like really exhausted by doing that. So, and I learned that the hard way as well, is that when you build a social media presence, like certainly for me, it's not about the amount of interaction that you have, it's about the quality of your engagement. So, I was really lucky in the early days. I got a lot of engagement and a lot of kind of chat with people who were like reviewers and bloggers and things. But at the same time, it was because I was out there kind of having conversations with people. And I think it's easy to forget that people are, they're people, and you can just have a conversation with somebody, and just to kind of chat to people and find out what they're about, and be interested in who your audience are and who your readers are as well, and what they're looking for, I think is a huge thing. But yeah, it's so easy to fall into that trap of just like repost and repost and repost and repost, and you've got to find that balance between give and take. It's if you're just there like 100% of the time going, you know, this is my book, this is my book, this is my book, then, you know, a few people pick it up and, you know, people might like it, but at the same time, it's going to bypass a lot of people. But if you actually get into, you know, like groups and like chat to people, it's just, and it's more fulfilling for you as well. Like, it's so much more interesting and, you know, satisfying to have real conversations with these people.
It's funny that, because I hear a lot of people say that they feel like they're overwhelmed with social media because they feel like they always have to have a presence. I think it's important to find that balance of, you want to have quality engagements, like you said. So it can be tough to
Yeah,
to find that
definitely,
balance.
definitely. And it's a learning curve, you know, and we all got to do it, and we've all got to go through it. And you find a way that works for you. What works for me might not work for someone else, but you know, it's trial and error, and you just got to not get disheartened when you don't get 5,000 followers straight away. You know,
Yeah,
it takes time.
definitely does. Yeah. And we had talked a little bit about magic systems. You had, low magic, and what are your thoughts on magic systems? What do you prefer, the low magic, or do you plan on maybe doing like a high fantasy with different magic systems in the future?
I think to write at the moment, I prefer the low fantasy. To read, I probably prefer maybe a mixture of both, because I do like a magical realism, but I also do love a good dragon as well. So
Yeah.
I mean, I think that for me, like, magic is quite a broad term. So I know, like, for a lot of people, magic is literal magic, and you know, people do spells and they cast and things like that. But you know, I also like things that are maybe like supernatural or superhuman. You know, things like the I can't think what the word for it is now, but you know, things that like biological and like genetic and things like that. So when I think of magic, I maybe think of like quite a wide spectrum of
Mhm.
things. So, you know, like, my book doesn't have a huge amount of magic in it, but it does have like that magic element where you don't really know what it is. So, you know, I like a little bit of mystery to it.
Yeah, I did. The high magic can get. I would imagine it getting a little complicated sometimes for an author, for a creator. But yeah,
Yeah, definitely. And you've got all these rules and things that you have to abide by, and yeah, I admire anyone that can like come up with these magic systems that just work flawlessly. So
it's a lot of Excel spreadsheets for magic system.
it is. Could you imagine? I think my laptop would
Yeah,
explode.
yeah, it's a lot to keep track of. And are there any resources you would recommend to someone who's starting to write, or who is looking for advice?
um, I mean, yes, possibly. Can I think of them now? No, I can't. Um, I mean, to be honest, I think one of the best things that you can do is to go out and read up and learn about the people who have done what you want to do successfully. So, you know, for me, when I first started out, I was looking at, you know, like the Ben Galleys and Rob Hayes and people like that, for, you know, how they went about it, how they present themselves, you know, how they interact with people. And you know, I really learned a lot just from observing like their journeys and their trajectories. So I think advice is a difficult one, because I do feel like there's a lot of advice out there for new writers, and I think, you know, some of it is fantastic and some of it is a little bit, you know, have to take it with a pinch of salt. So I always think the best way to learn is by watching others who have successfully done what you're trying to do, and then, you know, maybe like interact with them a little bit, maybe kind of, you know, see if you can get a bit of advice. And the great thing about this community is there are so many people who are so willing to talk about their experiences and talk about their own journeys. So, you know, that's the best place to start.
Like you're doing right now, so that hopefully it'll help someone else.
I'm not sure how I felt about taking my advice.
No,
Could be dangerous.
it could be a lot of Excel spreadsheets
Yes, that's it. That's my number one piece of advice: is Excel spreadsheets everywhere.
everywhere. Yeah, until your laptop blows up. Yeah. And do you have any techniques for overcoming creative blocks?
I think for me, I just try and write anything if I have a creative block. So going back to again the Excel spreadsheets, is there's been times where I've got a couple of weeks where I've really not been able to get over like a stumbling block or a part of a plot. So I just go back and I'll like revisit character profiles, or I'll write out like little bits of dialogue that I'll maybe use at some point, but don't have to be in the book, just to kind of keep that process going. And it's writing it's a lot of fun, but it is essentially a discipline. So it's like anything, you wake up some days and you really don't want to go to work, and you just want to lie in bed, but you've got to just get the computer on, get your typewriter out, and just kind of crack on with it. And it doesn't matter if what comes out is bad or good or completely useless. The point is that you have that like drive to just kind of push past it.
Yeah. And are there any fantasy tropes that you love and hate, or love or hate, I should say?
Oh gosh, so many. I feel like I'm kind of gonna like say terrible things about my own work now. Not the book that I published, but the first one I wrote. The first one I wrote was kind of a high fantasy, like very traditional epic fantasy, and it was like I took every trope I'd ever read, put them into like a canon, and just fired them onto a page, and it was so much fun. I loved it. But yeah, I possibly wouldn't let that one see the light of day now, I don't think. But I love like the whole like enemies who fall in love trope. I love the chosen child trope. I love the reluctant hero trope. I love the enemies who like last minute become friends trope. Like I love all that stuff. Like if it's in like an 80s, 90s fantasy movie, then I am all for it.
Yes. It's funny that those decades had so many, such a variation of different things that the different tropes, and learn to love them all. So it's good to have a
Yeah,
little bit
that's
of
it.
everything. Yeah.
Exactly. Some tropes are they're just tropes for a reason, because they're like guilty pleasures. Like everyone feels like embarrassed to say that they love them, but there's a reason there are so many of them. It's because people love tropes.
Yeah. Sometimes, yeah, they can be good. And what is something that your readers would be surprised to learn about you?
Um, they would be surprised to learn about me. Gosh, that's a really difficult one, because I feel like the last couple of years I've been so focused on like writing, and also we've been in lockdown for quite a lot of it, so I haven't really done or said anything that interesting. Um, I mean, I think people may be surprised to know that I don't know. I mean, I'm quite like vocal on social media, so I'm trying to think of something that I wouldn't have told people already. So, yeah, I have no idea. I have no idea. I don't think I'm that surprising.
Hmm.
I mean, I'm quite into running. Is that like?
Yeah, that's surprising. Yeah. So do you just do it for fun, or do you compete?
No, I mean, I'm just for fun. I mean, to be honest, the last couple of like maybe the last year, I've really been out of training, because I mean, I used to do a lot of physical fitness stuff. So I mean, to be fair, that's probably surprising to a lot of people. Um, but I've run a marathon before. I've done like different charity challenges and things like that. So yeah, I literally went back to training today. Actually, earlier on this afternoon, I went to the gym and did my first like weights and cardio session, like proper training session, in about a year. So every part of me is in pain right now, and like really hurts, and it's going to get worse tomorrow. But yeah, I'm really hoping I can kind of get back on the horse, and then hopefully I want to aim to do like another marathon within like the next 2 years. So we'll see how that goes.
That'd be great. And when you have a really heavy workout like that, how do you recover, or do you have any techniques for how you recover after a workout? You're going to be sore tomorrow.
I find like for me, if I do like today, I did like a lot of weights at the gym, and I ran back, because I mean the gym's probably like a 10-15 minute jog from there to where I live. So I usually find if I go for a little run like after I've done a workout, that does help. Hot shower, that helps as well. And then I just generally find like lying on the sofa as well, that helps, which is not something that sports like scientists and professionals would recommend, but that's what I end up doing usually. So but I'll be back again tomorrow to try and get into the routine of it as well. So
Nice. So when you're not running or training or writing, what do you enjoy doing?
I have a dog, which he is currently like snoring. I don't know, like you probably can't hear it because he's been quite quiet for a change, but he's right next to me. He's my rescue dog. He's a collie shepherd cross, and we've had him for like 4 years now. I've tried training him. It has not worked at all. He can sit, and that's about it. But he's just like my little shadow, my little friend. He sits with me when I'm writing. He's just woken up and looked at me because he knows I'm talking about him. But we do a lot of like walking, running together. So he's my other focus when I'm not doing writing or working out.
Yeah. There's something about a friendship with an animal like that that's really special. So
And he's just because he didn't have the greatest start in life as well. So he came over from a kill shelter in Romania where he was due to be euthanized. He was rescued by a friend of mine who brought him over. She worked in conjunction with like another rescue centre over in Romania. Brought him over to the UK, and I went up and I was a regular volunteer at her shelter. I used to go and like help out and like walk the dogs. And she said, we've got these rescues coming in. Do you want to come and like visit them and see what you think? Because she knew I was looking for one. And I walked into his pen, and literally it was just like love at first sight. And I could like hear like Foreigner, I want to know what love is playing in the back of my mind as he came out. And it's all in slow motion. It was just inseparable ever since. I was like, everyone else get out of the way, this is my dog.
What's his name?
He's called Gunner.
Gunner. Yeah. Nice.
Gunner, yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's always great. We have a couple of shelter dogs too, and we have a German Shepherd who we rescued, and we've had him for almost 2 years, and he's finally coming around. I think whoever had him before, I think he was really abused, and I think the male in the house was abusive. It took him almost a year to even feel comfortable to come up to me and let me pet him. So he's finally coming around now, but he's it's really, really special though when you get to that point when they finally come in and feel like they're able to come and lick you or something, and so he's coming around. But it's a really special moment when that happens.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's just so rewarding when you feel that level of trust with an animal that's had that traumatic experience. And mine was very similar, that he's very kind of like mistrusting of people, and it takes a long time to build those relationships. So and now he rolls around on my bed and like will chew up my furniture, and like he's just a dog now, which he never had the chance to be before, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, that's great. And you mentioned we talked about a little bit earlier about you used to write about movies, and I wondered what your opinion was on with the pandemic. Everything closed, and a lot of the studios went to streaming. Do you see theaters making a comeback, in-person theaters, or do you think streaming is the way it is going to go?
I mean, I would love to say that I think that the theatres will make a comeback, but I don't honestly think that they will, certainly not to the same extent that they were before. I think that, people are so used to that kind of immediate content now that, it's almost like for some like people become an alien thing to actually wait for a movie to come out and to like, arrange with friends and like go and have, it was an event. Whereas now I think, it's a great thing that we have all these kind of streaming platforms and contents. It's fantastic for like independent creators as well. So it's good to see that happening. But I think that there's a lot to be said for people kind of like the binge watch culture and the kind of the immediate accessibility of things. So I don't think we'll see theatres going back to the way they were before. I think that it's a whole new generation now of film. So, and I think so much now is going to online content as well. So, I think there's a lot of future in, your like Twitch platforms and YouTube creators and things like that. I know they've been going for a while, but I think it's just going to expand and get bigger and bigger.
And if a series comes out on a streaming platform that you want to watch, do you binge it, or would you prefer to binge, or would you rather wait and have the episodes like 1 or 2 a week?
I try to be good about like eking things out, but it's one of those things where we'll start watching a series, and like me and my husband, we work conflicting hours, and a lot of the time I'll be writing or I'll be out and about doing things, and he's at work at different times, so it's really difficult to schedule in time to actually watch anything. So we do have the kind of, well, I'm on episode 3, where are you? I'm on episode 8 kind of scenario going on. So sometimes I don't get the choice. Sometimes I have to binge things just to catch up. But no, I try to be good. I don't miss the days of waiting a week for one episode and then waiting another week for the next episode. That's I'm glad that that's not the case with a lot of things anymore. But yeah, I try to be good.
Yeah. It's changed so much. And have you seen any series lately that you really enjoyed?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I have been watching Arcane on Netflix, which is really recent. I think it only started on the 6th of November, I think. So they did 3 episodes on the 6th and another 3 on the 13th, and then they've got another 3 out next week, I believe. If you haven't watched it yet, it is the best animated series I have seen this year, possibly one of the best of all time. It is it's so fantastically written. Whoever did the score for it is a genius, and just the animation, the styling of it is just so emotive and it's so evocative. Like it's unbelievable. Like it's probably the only series I would give like a full-on 10 out of 10 to this year.
Wow, so high praise. Yeah,
they've got 3 episodes left, so I'm hoping that they keep it at that par now.
Yeah, I'll watch that. I just pulled it up, so I'll check that out. And everyone's talking recently about Squid Game. Did you watch Squid Game?
I did, yes. I really enjoyed it. I'll admit the first episode I kind of missed because my husband put it on, and I just kind of looked at it and I was like, okay, like maybe this is something that I'll get into later. And I wasn't paying attention. I was working at the time when he watched it. And then I think by the time it got to the second episode, I was like, my face just kept coming up over the top of the laptop, like just trying to see what was going on. And I think like by the third one, like the laptop was closed and that was it. They got me there. They hooked me in. So yeah, I thought it was a really good season. I'm interested to see what they're going to do when they do a second one.
Yeah, I'm wondering. I think some of these series, I think it's better if they just do a season or 2 or 3 and just leave it. It seems. I wonder how they're going to stretch it out longer.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've heard a few theories, and I have like a few theories of my own about what's going to happen. But yeah, we'll wait and see, because obviously it's one of those where the story's kind of wrapped up, so they could take it in any direction, really.
Yeah. Another one that was really that had a lot of traction was Midnight Mass. Did you catch that?
No, actually, I haven't. Okay. I don't know that one.
Yeah, it's a horror series. It's I forget his name now. The director directed a few of the Stephen King adaptations.
Okay.
His name is falling out of my brain right now, but yeah. So that was another one that people had really talked about and we enjoyed.
What was that on? Is it like a Netflix or a Amazon or?
Netflix.
Oh, Netflix. Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, I'll ask my son in a minute, and he'll probably know because he just knows everything horror genre related. So he'll probably be able to tell me straight off who directed it, who wrote it, who the second cameraman was.
Yeah. It's funny how we can know everything now that, tip of our fingertips.
Oh yeah, definitely. You were talking earlier about having the boards with all the different. That's what my son's like with the horror movies. Like he can just sit there and connect everything, and then he tells me about it, and I have no idea what he's talking about.
Are you a fan of horror?
I mean, I like. I'm more of a psychological horror fan. I like kind of, maybe something more on the thriller end of the spectrum. But I mean, my son that's what he wants to do. He wants to go into the horror and monster creation industry. He wants to make physical, like he wants to do like puppeteering and robots and digital creation, things like that. So he's really into like the gore and like the really horrible twisted stuff. So yeah, he keeps that separate though.
What are some of his favorite movies?
He loves. Well, I'm trying to think now which ones he's mentioned to me because he talks to me about horror movies a lot, and after a while, I think like my eyes glaze over. But there's one called Doctor Sleep, I think it's
Hmm.
called.
Yeah.
That he loves that one, and then there's I don't know what movie it is, but there's a creature called Moda, which is apparently quite famous, but not being a fan of the genre, I don't know too much about. But it looks like a weird kind of deer antler stag monster thing. So if people don't get what it is from that fantastic description, you can Google it. But yeah, his favourite one is The Thing, the John Carpenter film. That's like his favourite of all time. So he's pretty eclectic in the different types of horror that he watches.
Nice. Did he read your book?
No,
Oh.
he's aware of it, and like he knows what it's about. And like when my dad like picks him up in the car and they go out together, my dad will put the audiobook on because he's trying to get him to listen to it. But at the end of the day, he's 17 and his mom wrote it, so that's not cool. And like
Yeah.
he doesn't want to know.
What are some of your favorite movies?
I mean, I have such a strange, like, random array of tastes with movies. So I think my top three would be Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure is like one of my favourite films ever. It's just the happiest film that's ever been made. There's a film which not a lot of people have heard of, but it's got Tim Robbins in it. It's called The Hudsucker Proxy,
Hmm.
which is really, really good. Like slightly surreal, like fantasy. And I think it's like 1930s or 19. I can't quite remember, but yeah. And it's based this guy who goes and like works in this big company, and he's like out of his depth, and it's just a really interesting character study. And I would say it's a bit like predictable, but possibly something like Willow or Labyrinth. I mean, anything by Jim Henson as well as just I love the Muppets, So
Yeah.
Dark Crystal, Labyrinth, anything like that is good by me as well.
Yeah. It's weird that I think Willow is starting to get more attention last, I don't know, a couple of years, but it seems like people kind of forgot about that movie, and it's a great one. Great fantasy movie.
Yeah, I find that as well. I think like there's like this big like there was a resurgence a little while ago about The Princess Bride because I think people were worried that they were going to remake it, and I find that one gets mentioned a lot, but like say Willow doesn't really get that much of a stage anymore. So and it's such a good film. Like it's fantastic.
Yes, and we talked a little bit about atmosphere before. It's really great atmosphere in that movie. It's really, you feel like you're there.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah. So I do have two more questions for you before I let you go. So the
Okay.
first of the two, and I try and ask this every time of all my guests. The first one is, what was your first job?
My first job, well, technically my first job was going door to door selling lottery tickets for the local village newsletter who had this lottery where if you won it, you got like £10. But apparently that is not a job that a 13-year-old is allowed to do. So I lost that after about 2 days. So, but my first proper job was I sold ice cream from a little ice cream cart outside of a cafe at an art centre down the road from where my parents live. And I worked there for one summer, and it was just the most blindingly hot courtyard. And I just kind of sat in like the sun for like 5 hours a day and just like melted basically. So, but it was fun, I think.
So what were your takeaways from that job after the summer that you worked there?
My main one was that I needed to go to the gym and work out because I had like these flimsy little noodle arms. Couldn't actually get any of the ice cream like out of the ice cream tubs. So, it would be really embarrassing me trying to like, almost like excavate this ice cream out of the tub. So bigger arm muscles was the first one. And then I think the second one was probably to be confident around people because it was like the middle of summer, it was like tourist area, and like people would kind of come up and be really demanding and like want things, and I was just like this teeny tiny little like 14, 15-year-old. So, it teaches you how to handle those situations.
It takes some getting used to, doesn't it, to deal with those kind of situations. It's definitely a learned skill. It's tough.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's a tough one. So the last question I have for you, like I said, I try and ask this of every guest, is: was there a question that, if roles were reversed, if you would have asked that I didn't ask?
Um, do you know what? I was thinking about this the other day, and I remember saying to my husband there was something that nobody ever asked me that I really wish they would ask, and now I can't remember what it was that I said. I mean, I don't know necessarily that I could think of a question I haven't been asked, because I tend to just tell people things that even if they don't ask, that
Yeah.
they probably don't want to know. But yeah, like I can't think of anything off the top of my head now. I'll go away in a minute and I'll think of it. It'll wake me up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'll know what it was then. So.
Well, what do you think of it? Let me know. I'm curious to know what that question. Now I'm in suspense until I hear back from you on what that question was. I'm going to be wondering what it was.
I will. You'll get a message from me like in the early hours of the morning going, okay, I've thought of what it is now.
Yeah. Let me know. I'm curious what that would be, because I would always try to expand and improve the questions and try and get more, try and get better questions. So it helps out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if someone was looking to connect with you or to find out more about you, where can they find you or find your work?
So I do have my own website, which is HL Tinsley Writes. So I put a lot of information about the book and where you can find things on there. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm on Twitter. So it's at Holly Tinsley with the E as a 3. I'm on there quite a lot, so I tend to spend half my life on social media, it seems. So that's always the best place to start. And then the book itself, you can find it on Amazon. You can find it on Audible, because there's an audio version now as well. So yeah, it's all on there.
How was the process of getting the audiobook done? Was that a really tough process?
I didn't find it tough at all. I think that's mainly thanks to RJ Bailey, who did the audio for me. He is such a professional, but also great fun to work with as well. So he really made the whole journey really seamless. He knows what he's doing. He knows what's going to work, and he's very engaged with the writers that he works with. He wrote a couple of things for me where he was giving me ideas and pictures for stuff in the book, and it was really in sync with how I pictured things. So he just made that whole process really, really enjoyable.
That must be a really tough art form to be a narrator. There's a lot that's involved in it. It's really tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. And there's a huge amount of trust, I think, and cooperation that goes into working with somebody who does an audio version of your book, because you know what you want and you know how you want it to be performed and perceived, and obviously they have a better knowledge of how their kind of style of working needs to be. So yeah, I think to find someone who you can trust to take your book and maybe take it a direction that you wouldn't have thought yourself is very important. So I've got to thank RJ for being a fantastic person to work with.
Awesome. And you mentioned your website, and I'll have all those links down below, but I get asked a lot about mailing lists. Do you have a mailing list on your website that people can sign up for and get updates?
I don't yet. I do plan to have one put in place probably after Christmas, just because the second book is obviously coming out, and I know people want to know where they can get it and when. So I will get one sorted. I have had it on my to-do list for a long time now, so I will hold myself accountable and get it done.
Well, don't look at that until you're done with the second book. So we don't want to take you away from the second book until you're done.
Yeah, I'll do that
So
first.
really
I'll prioritize.
Yeah, don't worry about the mailing list until the second book is done, and then you can worry about something else. So
That's
just to read it. Yeah. So thanks again. I know it's tough to schedule with the time difference and everything. So I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you have a lot going on. You have a lot to do. So I really appreciate it.
No, thank you so much for inviting me. It's been amazing, and I will just say as well, the background just looks fantastic.
I was trying to do the book justice and trying to get some of that match, so help get the word out. So I really love the book, and I'm really looking forward to the second one or anything else you write. So I'm a fan.
Oh, thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. I hope let's do it again soon sometime. And if you want to come back when the second book is getting ready, then be more than happy to have you promoted and get the word out.
Oh, thank you very much. And by then I might have actually thought of that question as well. So
Okay. Okay. Well, when you think of it, let me know so I can add it to my list. Awesome. Well, thanks
will do.
again.